apart for you. In addition to the fact that you were abandoned, you are also handsome and the girls think you are cool, but in fact, you are just a stupid deceiver who has a supernatural ability to change the body. In this world, when children become teenagers, they gain supernatural abilities that remain until adulthood and then disappear from childhood. You like to think that you are the coolest of all. When you became a teenager, you have a supernatural ability to inhabit other people, but there are some restrictions. For example, you can only stay in them for 5 seconds, and while you are doing this your own body just falls and it seems that you are sleeping. After 5 seconds your soul returns to your body. Over the years you learn to use this ability in different ways. For example, to get an answer to one of the most important questions man can have: what is it like to be a woman and have big plans? You also use this ability to take revenge on people you don't like by inhabiting their bodies and starting fights. But most of all, this ability helps you to sign up with Nicholas Nicky and get the highest grades in the class. Thanks to this ability, he was able to enter a private school and even pass the entrance exams with excellent marks. On the opening day of the school, he goes on stage to give a speech on behalf of a new student, and all the girls in his class think he is attractive, smart and charming, so he's often asked out on a date, and he gladly refuses them, feeling like a cool guy. Shimo and they return home. When they stop at the crossing and talk, Yumi possesses Ishin and in 5 seconds runs away from Yumi as far as possible in her body. Then he possesses the truck driver and makes him crash into Yumi up before she can transform into a drink vending machine. He returns to his body and saves her by pushing off. If it was then, and you checks the driver to make sure no one was hurt. Yumi thanks him for saving her and says that they were going to the famous Bakery Cafe and invites him to go with them. He uses reverse psychology and tries to act polite and shy, and this makes Mishimu go home to let his best friends be alone with you. Later that evening, you and Yumi find yourself at the Bakery Cafe and enjoying the food. Yumi asks him if he wants to go somewhere with her again after school, and he agrees with a self-imposed smile. The next day at school, Yumi texts him that she will be waiting for him outside, but at that moment he is called to the principal's office. There the director introduces himself as Yeski and says that the authorities asked him to force you to take the entrance exam again because you were suspected of cheating. If he refuses to take the exam or gets less than 90 points, he will be expelled from school. After hearing this, he says that this is nonsense, but having no other choice, he decides to try and copies the answers from the sheet that the director is holding. The exam begins, and since he doesn't know anything, he uses his abilities and inhabits the body of Isiki. To his surprise, instead of the answer sheet, he is holding a magazine in his hands and angrily tears it into pieces. When he returns to his body, the director asks what happened, and he replies that it seemed to him as if he tore the answer sheet into pieces. At that moment, a pale blonde with a camera scares him to death, suddenly appearing from behind his back. She introduces herself as the president of the student council of another school, although Kan says that she finally caught him in a lie. She shows him a video in which he falls asleep. Ban says that he just said that he saw how Ishiki tore his answer sheet, but in fact, he just dropped his head on the table. In addition, she recorded several more videos where he did this in past exams. Yu tries to justify himself by saying that he has a disease in which he suddenly falls asleep and he can't do anything about it. But she shows him his medical record from the entrance exams and says that there is no mention of such a disease. The young man begins to panic and runs away from there and runs past a guy with glasses who seems to be following him. Turns the corner, suddenly something crashes into the store behind him, and he looks around in horror, not understanding what happened. He runs forward and something crashes into the trash pile next to him, and he starts to panic even more. Eventually he gets to the river bank, takes a breath, and turns around to see that 4 guys are standing on the other side of the row and looking at him. The guy runs up and instantly flies into the air with Yu in his arms and jumps over the river like a pebble until they land on the other side. He asks what he just did, and the guy explains that he has a supernatural power called charge, which allows him to move very quickly in one direction, but he doesn't control it very well, and his braking technique has not yet been developed. You ask what kind of defective technique it is and asks why he was chasing him. That moment Miao appears and says that they want him to transfer to their academy while he is still a teenager. She says that there are many people like him in the world with supernatural abilities, but these powers are a disease and they will disappear when he grows up. In their academy, they keep an eye on people like him so that they don't abuse their powers and spread chaos in the world. So until his powers disappear, he must stay in their academy, and She already got permission from his guardian. She asks, he tried to use his powers, although he is quite cute and a bit of teasing him. You get angry and try to hit her, but she suddenly turns invisible and beats you like a punching bag. You ask if she can turn invisible, but the four-eyed guy Juge explains that she only becomes invisible to one person whom she chooses, and to everyone else she looks normal before letting you go. She says that you will be working in the student council because your powers could be useful in catching other people with supernatural powers like you. Later that night, you return home and are greeted by your little sister Ayumi. She says that she has good news and that their uncle told her that they both got scholarships in Star Academy and will soon move there to celebrate this event. She prepared them both an omelet with rice, pizza sauce and ketchup, and Yumi says that she misses it because mom was cooking. You look down sadly and tell her not to think about her mother because you are still angry with her for leaving you for her uncle after the divorce, and Yumi says that she still wants them to be together and talking about the family. She admits that lately it seems that there was someone else in their family, but you say that they only have to you and her and ask her not to mix dreams with reality. After that, Ayumi looks at the stars through a telescope and you invite her to watch some night show because it is a proven way to make friends. Write everything down in the comments. Write it down. The next morning, they are moving to a new room at the academy and Ayumi is very glad that she now has a big room. During the day, you go out with Ayumi and tell her about the transfer, trying to explain what still want to date her but won't admit it, but Ayumi says she understands and politely dumps you, and it shocks you. In the evening, Na and Joji come into their new room to help them get settled. They make fun of you. Meet your little sister and start helping them unpack their things. Na shows Ayumi a few tricks with her abilities and becomes her good friend when everyone leaves. You and Ayumi have dinner and you have a nostalgic dream in which you feel that you once had a twin brother and you wonder if Ayumi influenced you. The next day you get ready for your new school, and before leaving Ayumi puts your favorite omelet with pizza sauce in your lunchbox. It used to be your favorite dish, but you have long grown out of it. At school you are greeted by Na and Juji and you ask them if everyone at school has supernatural powers. Joji answers that most of the students have them, soon will appear or have already begun to appear. Neo says that before, if they found someone with supernatural abilities, they would take him and send him to a laboratory for terrible experiments. But then one person created a system to protect such children. You tries to calm you down by saying that everything is not so bad, but then adds that the older brother was one of those who could not cope and became the subject of experiments. You ask her why he should use his abilities outside of school, being a member of the student council, and Nell explains that their job is to find such children and protect them or warn them not to use their abilities outside of school for their own safety. For this work he will be paid, and judging by the fact that he has a younger sister, he will be able to spend a lot of these paper notes. You accepts the offer. Then he goes to his new class and meets everyone. He thinks that he can act cool here too, but then he notices that Na and Joji are in his class, and this ruins his plans to pretend to be cool during lunch. You ask Joji how Neo became the student council president in the first year of school. He says that this position is open to all students and goes to those who quickly make responsible decisions using their abilities. After that, they go to the cafeteria to buy sandwiches because she was tired of eating sweet rice with. There are a lot of people there with an omelet, so Joji decides to use his ability and, running past the food counter, throws money, grabs for sandwiches with cutlets and breaks the window on the other side. Then he comes from behind and hands her sandwiches and says that he always wears light armor under his uniform so as not to get seriously injured. After that, they return to class and have lunch together. You asks him why she seems so lonely. He says that her ability allows her to be invisible to only one person, which means that if she uses her abilities against everyone else, it will seem that she is just beating people without protection, and this will give her a bad reputation among the students. Soon Now comes up to them and says that their partner is coming and they may have a new task. They all go to the student council office, and you notice on the table in the center a huge map of the city. Suddenly a guy with wet long hair comes in and points his finger at the map. He says that this place is the Namba school and his power is telepathy, and then leaves without saying another word. You ask the others what it was and they explain what it is, their colleague who helps them find people with supernatural abilities and determine their abilities. After that, they all run away from class and go to the Namba school. Neo and Rujira enter the school and begin to ask the students about whether anything strange happened that they could notice after a while. Neo runs up to Yu and says that they found a suspicious person and asks him to inhabit their body to search the bag. They both run and see a guy who runs away with the bag. He uses his power, takes control of it, and begins to shake out the contents of the bag on the ground. When his strength ends, Rujira grabs the guy and holds him, while he searches the contents and finds a black letter with some photographs. It turns out to be this photo of one of the girls from the guy's school, and in the second photo it seems to be translucent, and you can see that under his clothes. They ask him about it, and he says that he bought the photos, and when they threatened him, he admitted that he received them from a boy named Yude from the second class. Having received this tip, they run to class and find out that Yude is actually the president of the school's archery club. Mi breaks into his locker and finds a bunch of evidence of him from. After that, they meet him alone and surprise him by appearing right in front of him out of nowhere. She tells him everything and asks why he did it, and he says that he needed money to cure a family member of a disease. Mi tells him that this is the wrong way, and if he doesn't stop, he will soon be caught and sent to a laboratory for experiments as an alien from Area 51. Buddha takes a photo of her and tries to blackmail her, but Yu inhabits his body and returns the photo. Then Uda points an arrow at her and in the worst case shoots, but Joji rushes past like a flash and takes the arrow with him. After that, they force him to surrender and the case is settled. Having done this, they return to school, and on the way, Yu asks Mei and her brothers and what happened to him. After his scientists took her, says that it's not a secret and that they can go see his brother tomorrow. The next day they take a high-speed train and then a bus to a large hospital on top of a beautiful cliff with a picturesque view. Now she tells how it all started. She just received a scholarship to go to a prestigious high school. Like most anime fathers, her father never returned home. After going for milk, she was raised by her mother along with her older brother Kazuki. Kazuki was an aspiring terrorist who tried to make a contract with one of the major record companies one day. The mother called them both and said that she enrolled them in a boarding school. Kazuki was indignant and asked why she was doing this, because he would leave soon anyway and it would be useful for the family. In addition, he's good for nothing because he loves to play the guitar. Now he doesn't even study and is not smart. But the mother knelt down and feeling broken and depressed silently asked them to do as she says. Kazuki still respected his mother and agreed with her wishes. Now said that this new school was not bad, but although she studied there, she could not see her brother for years, and she talked about it or tried to meet him. Her friends surrounded her and took her away. The only thing about this school was that after classes she had to undergo regular medical examinations. It turned out that her brother had a supernatural ability that allowed him to vibrate at different frequencies while she was at school. Cruel, inhumane experiments were carried out on her brother, and when she was finally able to see him, after for so many years he was in complete despair and didn't even remember who he was and who she was. The friends who surrounded her turned out to be fake students whom the scientists sent to keep her away, and she was kept there, assuming that she, too, might have superpowers like her brother. After all this, she lost the ability to trust anyone and ran away from there. Soon they arrive at the hospital and go to visit her brother, and you see that he is mentally unstable and degraded. He thinks that he is making up things, screaming music loudly and tearing sheets and pillows. After taking sleeping pills, he becomes lethargic and now takes him out in a wheelchair to get some fresh air. She says that she has lost hope, but that was until she met the only person she now trusts. And he created this school and allowed her to study and also paid for the treatment of her brother in this hospital. She says that no one is looking for a cure for her brother because for scientists, people with superpowers are like batteries, and when one of them sits down they just buy a new one to conduct their experiments on it. After that they finish the day, and Yu returns to his room. He is greeted by Umi and prepares vegetable curry for dinner. Later in the evening she tells him that she is looking forward to the appearance of a special comet that passes over the Earth once every few hundred years, and next morning, he wakes up, goes to school, and Ayumi puts her sweet rice omelette in his lunchbox. He tells her that he no longer needs to cook his lunch because no one else doesn't bring food from home, and the canteen is a good way to make new friends. She lowers her eyes a little, but then says that she take it anyway because she already cooked. Later during lunch you go to the canteen with Juj and he orders them both special scurry rice. Using his incredible abilities, now texts Joji to go to the student council office because their colleague has a new lead. They both go to the office, and As usual, the guy with long hair points to some street on the map and says that this time the person has two abilities: telekinesis and pyrokinesis, as well as the ability to talk to the dead and control fire. This interests them, and they go to the alley to find this person with two abilities. They investigate and meet a woman who says that she saw an elderly man stalking a TV star and singer Yuzu. After hearing her name, you understand that this is the name of the singer who is crazy about Ayumi, and Joe Guerra begins to act like a fan. It turns out he's a real fan of YUSI, follows her on all social networks including her illegal account on OnlyFans. He tries to figure out how to contact her label and suggests call them and ask for a meeting, but she says that he is not so cool, that the world revolves around him, and that the label will never allow a bunch of high school students to meet their idol. She looks around and notices a suspicious man who turns the corner and runs after him. As expected, the man knocks her down, throws her to the ground, and runs away and takes control of his body, and Raji's knocks him down, breaking his ribs. Neo sits on top of him and says what if he wants them to call him an ambulance. He must tell him where Yusa is and why he was running away from them. He says that he was just following in order to catch her on behalf of the TV channel. They send him to the hospital by ambulance, and a red-haired guy approaches them. He asks what they were doing there and says that they are looking for Yusa because they think that she has problems and want to protect her. Then he asks how they managed to defeat that big guy, and Neo says that they also have supernatural abilities like Yusa, and the guy is surprised. He asks where from. She knows this and asks her to prove it. I become invisible right in front of him to prove that she is right. Then they all go to the basement together where they meet Yusu and another guy. Joji immediately starts drooling on her like Sanji, but then pushes her away and starts asking questions. Yusu says that she has a disease due to which she suddenly falls asleep and often wakes up in another place. She concludes that Yusu can control dead spirits in her body and asks the guys about it. They tell her that Yusu had an older sister named Misa who died in an accident. At this moment, the expression on Yusu's face changes dramatically and she begins to behave like a real gangster. She asks why they are talking about her with strangers and sets fire to everything around, but then she sees marshmallows in front of her and calms down. Now talks to her, finds out that Miss controls Yusu's body with the help of her power, and thus she can use her own power to control fire. The secret is revealed. She asks who these two guys and Misa or replies that these are her friends. To then she asks why Yusu is chasing, and the guys say that it is because of the smartphone. It turns out Yusu accidentally brought it home after filming, and there is a message from some big TV producer about fraud and money laundering, because of which he can be arrested if he ends up in the police. But regardless of whether she will return him now or not, she will not be able to work in this industry because of the corrupt criminals. Issa says, what if this happened to her sister? She would burn down the entire TV station if she didn't want her sister to go to jail. She says that she has a plan to protect her sister and get revenge, and asks the guys to bring fireproof clothing. Later that night they call the producer and return the device to him, but when the producer starts acting like Missa takes matters into her own hands and burns two of his men. Then she makes one of the bodyguards stab himself in the leg with a knife, and the last one disappears in the blink of an eye. After that she approaches the producer, punches and kicks him, and he falls to the ground. She threatens him, throws the phone, and tells him not to stop her from becoming a star, otherwise she will find him in hell, and he runs away like a girl. It turns out her childhood friends replaced the bodyguards by wearing fireproof jackets so she could set them on fire. You took control of the third guard, forced him to stab himself in the leg, and Jojiro knocked the last guard to the ground. Finally now beat up the producer to make it look like Missa has divine power. Once everything is settled, she tells her that transferring to their academy will be the best way to protect Yusa, and that when her powers disappear, she will no longer be able to control her body. Misa doesn't mind at all, but the red-haired guy doesn't want to laugh. He asks for the opportunity to talk to her alone and confesses his feelings to her. He feels guilty for surviving the accident in which Misa died and would like to be with her, but she decided to commit suicide. Misa calms him down and says that he needs to move on and improve his life, and then decides to transfer to the Star Academy, and everything is settled. Yu returns home and, as usual, he is met by Ayumi, who is waiting for him to have dinner. They sit down at the table and Yu tells to her about meeting Yuso, and she starts acting like a fan. He tells her that she might transfer to their school, and Ayumi is even more happy that he can meet her. The next morning he wakes up and sees that Ayumi is preparing him breakfast today. On the menu is French toast drizzled with Ayumi's special sauce, you guessed it. It's pizza sauce. You swallows all these sweet toasts and hurries to school, where he meets with Dira. Everyone in the class is discussing Yusu and her transfer to their school, and you thinks what will happen when she actually arrives. Soon the lesson begins and the teacher enters the class to introduce new and popular student who transferred to them. Everyone begins to greet Yusa and it turns into a dance party until the teacher reprimands them. Yusa, as always, acts nice and asks everyone to calm down and then says that she will often go on breaks due to work but will enjoy spending time in high school with them. Now her place is next to them, and everyone begins to circle around her like a flock of sheep. Later that day now comes and says that they have a new lead and asks Yusu to come with them. They all go to the student council office and, as usual, that guy with wet hair comes in and drops a drop of water on the map. This time, their target has telekinesis and Yusu asks what that means. You tells her and says that he seems to know who their target is judging by the location. Then she shows them a video of a guy named Eric Huey from the Kanai Academy baseball team. He is quite popular among the young players and is said to be joining the big leagues soon due to his recent performances in the last 3 games. Due to the slow motion, it is clear that he is holding the ball he is throwing incorrectly and suspects that he is using his abilities to control the ball in the air after it leaves his hands, making such incredible throws. After that they all go to Kanai Academy and introduce themselves to Era. Them now directly tells him to stop using his supernatural powers during the games, otherwise he will lose them. By the time he gets into the professional league he will be kicked out of the team, and this will ruin his career forever. She tells him that he should play using his abilities and he replies that she cannot expect him to believe all this nonsense. She tells him to stop acting like that and shows his abilities by becoming invisible right in front of him. At this moment Misa takes over and also shows him fire. He tries to calm her down and she spits on the ground in anger and Joji immediately starts looking for this spit like present _ at the same time he is trying to understand that it was Annie Yubi Misa who did this and thinks about how pathetic it looks. Neo tells him that if he doesn't stop he will be caught and sent to scientists who will carry out experiments until his abilities are exhausted. He looks very skeptical, but she invites him to play baseball against her school. If he wins she will not interfere in his affairs, and if he loses then he should stop using his abilities. He agrees and they decide to meet at the Star Academy baseball field next Sunday noon. On the way back, you ask if there is anyone on their team who can hit with telekinesis, but in order for everything to work out, they themselves join the team and force you to use his abilities to your advantage. Next Sunday, they all meet on the field and both teams line up against each other. The game begins and at first it seems that the forces are equal. Their batters cannot hit the pitches of Star Academy and Aeritham is simply impossible with swords. Beat them off. Neo chastises them for bad behavior and her own pitcher gets mad at her saying that he is trying his best to, but when someone gets mad at her for her sharp tongue she calls Yusa for help and makes the boys act like idiots. To get them back on the field during the game they notice that their catcher is also very good because he can catch crazy balls without any ability. The game continues and they reach the final points. Neo decides that their team can also use his abilities to add spice and tells you to take possession of their batters to score points. You manage to do this but their catcher returns points having taken the base. Now the last round and Joji comes out to bat. Maya tells him to touch the sword and then use his ability to touch first base. Joe Jarrett does exactly and he has to pay for it by oblivion of his ugly face. Then Misa also starts hitting them with swords and she ends up using her ability to hit the ball and score the winning point. He asks how to do it and she tells him to play fair at least once in his life and calls him a fool. With these words Yu comes out to bat and tries his best, but in the end Rifu uses his abilities and throws the ball and Yu miss a run, but his attempt also failed and this gave a chance to reach the base and they won the match. After their antics you feel happy and wonder why he did this and joins them. They ask Orpheum not to use his abilities anymore and he promises that he won't again. He says that he is just an average pitcher, but his friend Takada is an amazing catcher who can hit the major league. But as his friend he decided to stay with him even though their school doesn't have a very good baseball program. He wanted to get into the major league and bring his friend there. Now uses Tanjutsu and tells him to cheer for his friend from the stands and she is sure that one day he will be proud of him and tell others that this amazing player is his friend. As soon as all this is settled Arifalin asks Yuna to take possession for a moment. Erfulin does it for her as expected. He accepts it for 5 seconds and then returns to his own and asks what she wanted to see, and she says that they will have to wait and see after that. She returns home to have dinner with his sister as usual and watches as he is a fan of the new commercial and song. And a few days later, as usual, everyone in the class crowds around YS like sheep, and she, in turn, minds her business and listens to music as usual. Suddenly a group of girls approaches her. They drag her out of the classroom and take her out of the school. You ask the question, what does all this mean? And you decide to follow them, and peeks you see the girls attack her and push her to the wall. Then they beat her and throw her to the ground and then leave. You come out and ask what it was, and she replies that people don't like the way she fights since they first encountered her and they take revenge on her like this. She is also not in the mood and notices that she received a message from their colleague. She returns to the student council office and calls everyone there. Yusa looks at the beaten face. Misa comes out and says that they should. But now she says that she doesn't want this and lets them go. At that moment, as usual, the guy with the biggest drop comes in and points to the mountains on the map. This time their goal can fly, and it seems that now she also knows about this person. She puts a piece of paper and shows that recently in those mountains they saw a flying man and their goal should be this guy. So far, they are only talking about this in niche groups, but if these cases continue, then soon they will be talking about them in the local news, so you need to act quickly. And she tells everyone to prepare for a trip to the supermarket. You helps her with groceries and she buys a lot of corn. She says that without grilled corn, you can't have a barbecue, and goes to the meat department for rib steaks and sausages. You add vegetables and peppers, and they argue about healthy eating while Jojira wash the vegetables and think how they look from the outside like they are a healthy couple. Joji soon begins to think about the fact that he is finally left with Yua alone. They buy everything they need and go to the mountain. She tells the guys to carry tents and other equipment, and she will take care of the food. You asks if they will stay for the night, and she answers that they will stay there as long as it takes to lure the guy pilot. With these words, they go to the place they found in the magazine and set up camp there. Assembling the tent, you almost fall into the dry well and laugh at him. Then you cover him with earth and say that it would be funny to watch him fall in there. Rest of the day they spend preparing food and talking to each other. At night you think where he went and go into the forest, where you find a cliff with a beautiful hot sky. He sits on a stone and listens to music, and you come up and sit next to him. He asks what kind of music she always listens to, and she gives him her player so that he can listen. She says that this is a post-rock band called Jet, and her brother used to like her until he went crazy. He listens and immediately feels the deed, but literating that the lead singer of the group blind in both eyes, and maybe that's why her songs are so deep and heartfelt. You see how excited and happy she is, and you understand that this is the first time you've seen her like this, and we all know where this will lead. Yes, guys, she adds that now she spends all day recording such liars like him, but her dream is to one day record a video for Jean. After that they both return to the camp, and now says that they will be on duty in turns for 4 hours, and the boys can sleep first. You and Juji go to bed, and you dream a nostalgic dream about how he is another brother or sister like last time, and you think that it was the next morning. They catch fish and cook it on a fire. They also take a bath separately, and you notice that Jojiro has a rather toned body. He says that because of his abilities he has to wear armor under his clothes, and that his strong body should always be with him. Another day passes, and the guide who was supposed to fly away never shows up, and you say that you want to return because you are home. You have a little sister who needs to be taken care of. Mi says that she can't let this happen and asks you not to worry because she feels that tomorrow it will be able to finish this journey. The next day, and they are preparing food. A young man in blue clothes approaches them. He asks what they are doing here and says that they are runaway high school students who want to live here. The guy doesn't believe it and says that he will call the police to take them home, but now he says that then the police will take him too. He asks why, and she answers that this is private property, and judging from his appearance it is also suspicious that he is here alone. He tries to come up with an excuse but immediately realizes that it is a lie and says that he is the same guy who can fly. She says that he must have chosen these private mountains to train and not be seen by people, but when he saw that they had set up a camp here and were not going to leave, he probably got worried. He tries to remain calm, and turns around saying that this is all nonsense but steps on his tail saying that she filmed his training on camera. Hearing this he comes to rages and jumps down to take the camera from her but instead falls into a dry well, which is now overgrown with grass. Once at the bottom he uses his abilities and jumps out of the deep hole to take the camera from her. You tell Yuzuka to do something but she says that she can't because he's too close. The guy grabs the camera, takes off and flies into the sky. You use your abilities and intercepts. You find yourself in heaven when you open your eyes and see a magnificent view, a bird's eye view of the city. As he falls towards his seemingly inevitable death, he tries his best to use the guy's abilities and manages to fly up without crashing. After 5 seconds he returns to his body and the guy falls to the ground with several bruises. Neo and the others approach him and introduce themselves and explain that they are here to protect Tin Man, that one day his abilities will disappear and what will happen if he is in the air when this happens also. The scientists must be rubbing their hands with excitement to see how his body forces him fly, and that she is sure that he does not want to become a lab rat. The guy introduces himself, Sada, and says that he thought that he was the only one in this world with abilities, and that he dreamed that he was the chosen one, and his name is the Great Hero Sky Highs. They all look at him without a face and think, why did they let such a weirdo survive? After that, they all go home, and you return to the not very happy girl. But she, like the best little sister, understands you and treats you to amazing homemade noodles with vegetables. You notice that there is no pizza sauce in it, and you are grateful for it, God, and then you ask Ayumi about it. She says that she wanted to add it because it is the secret ingredient of their family, but it ran out, and the officer at the entrance for some reason does not allow her to go out alone, so she could not buy more. You mentally thank the officer for saving your life and use a little healthy conversation to praise Ayumi for the fact that her cooking became even tastier without pizza sauce. After that, she says that she has a lot to discuss with you because you were not there, and says that the bow is from her class asked her out on a date, but she turned him down. You say that this could be a turning point in her life and you don't mind if the guy is a good person. Suddenly Ayumi sneezes and you check her forehead for a fever and notice that she has a slight fever. You give her medicine, put her to bed, and tell her to rest. The next morning Ayumi, still not feeling well and she has a fever. You tell her to stay in bed and rest, and what will you tell the school? But she won't come. Today after that you go to school and spend the day. As usual, during lunch, some guy with wet hands comes into the dormitory and shows on the map where their room is. He says that the force that has manifested itself this time is called collapse. Everyone is surprised what kind of force is, and you also ask yourself why it is not called destruction. Collapse. This is a word that implies some kind of destructive force that can destroy the building. Now says that in their school the towers of students often awaken because this is the purpose school, but wonders why is this student now in the dorm. Yusu assumes that maybe someone is sneezing and it makes you feel uneasy because you're thinking about Ayumi. You notice the expression on his face and ask him about it, and he says that his sister is now in the dorm and he's worried about her. Ami says that siblings often manifest towers if one of them awakens then, and suggests that they go and check. You says that it would be nice to go now and take some Ryu with you, but Joji is too nosy and it's not worth taking him with you. You think if you should take over his body and jump off the roof, but you notice this and call Jojen out the window and see if there is a big giraffe there, and when he comes to the window to look, you kick him hard and he flies out the window. You call him an ambulance and you look in horror and think what just happened. After that they decide to buy rice porridge for Ayumi and you invites everyone to have dinner together. He says that Yusa is always alone because her sister left and now she is practically an orphan and her brother is in the hospital and he has trust issues. He feels sorry for both of them and he insists that they have dinner together in his dorm and go to the store. They buy expensive products and then together with you go to her house. Before going in, you tells Yua not to show herself because her sister will be very happy and her nose will bleed if she sees her. Yua, as always, puts on a mask and sunglasses and calls himself Superman. They enter the house and see that her classmates are there. Her best friend and class leader, Namu, gets up, says hello to everyone and introduces herself. Then a guy with brown hair gets up and introduces himself as Aiko Namura, says that this is the guy who was rejected by Yumi, but he still hopes and wants to make friends with her. Besides them, there is also a girl with purple hair named Kanashi. They all say goodbye to Ayumi and leave. Then Yusa comes in and says hello to Ayumi. They sit down and talk, But then Yusa looks into the room, and Ayumi immediately recognizes her and starts crying like a fool. Yusa wipes her nose a couple of times and they all have dinner together. After they finished, Yusa leaves because she works as an idol and offers to wash the dishes and then wipes her with a towel. Ayumi looks at them and asks if they are dating and teasing them, but they both pretend that they don't know anything. Then they give Ayumi some medicine and put her to bed, and she says that she doesn't want to sleep because she also had a nightmare last night. Neo tries to ask her about the details of the dream, but then becomes silent and goes out with you. She tells him that he needs to ask her about it because it could indicate what ability she has awakened, and although we are 100% sure that it is she, and Yumi is a very likely candidate. When she leaves, you go to Ayumi and ask her about it, and she says that she dreamed about the ground and the walls cracking and she falls underground the next day. She tells everyone about it and they suspect that this is a very dangerous method that can harm the owner himself. Therefore, you need to be careful and try to keep her in the dorm as long as possible to avoid an accident and not harm other people. On the next morning, Ayumi has already recovered and wants to go to school, but you asks her to stay home for one more day to rest. She doesn't like it, but when he leaves, she gets stressed and secretly runs away from the dorm to go to school. At school, you and Yujiro are having lunch during recess, as usual, and then Mora calls them. She tells them that Yuma has come to school. Yu starts to worrying and they all rush to the middle school together to make sure that everything is okay with her. At this time, Aiko tries to invite again Ayumi for lunch, but Nomura comes up to her and takes her away. In the end, Ayumi runs into Kanashi and says that she is very jealous of her because she wanted to date Aikai, but then she transferred to their school, and now he only thinks about her. Then she takes out a stationary knife, pulls out the blade and says that the time has come for Ayumi to suffer. Ayumi tries to calm her down, but when that doesn't help, she runs to the roof, but unfortunately, the door to the roof is locked and she ends up in corner, and Kanashi climbs the stairs with a knife in his hand. She begins to panic and her ability is activated. Everything around is crumbling and breaking. Kanashi falls, but he is saved and Ayumi falls under the rubble outside. You and the others run into the school, climbing over the fence and trying to make it on time. But then they see that the far wing of the building is collapsing and Yu rushes there to find his sister crushed by the rubble, and then a piece of fragments of the edges also falls on him. Leads a comment in the review section for this anime with little Sanji having a nosebleed. It's time to talk about the 7 stages of grief. After treatment in the hospital, he opens his eyes and asks where his sister is. The doctors say she couldn't survive and it leaves him in shock. He can't believe what happened and continues like this as they hold a memorial service for Ayumi, and then he returns to his empty dorm room where no one greets him. He cries, asking himself, did he ever make it show her how much he loves her, and falls asleep in tears. The next day, he wakes up on the floor with swollen eyes and goes to check if there is anything in the refrigerator. He eventually finds a box of noodles that his uncle sent him when he first moved in and decides to eat it. The days of the week pass and almost a month ends with him sitting in his room wrapped in sheets. There are empty cups lying on the floor and his eyes are becoming more lifeless every day. Jojira and Yusa often come with homemade food and offer to eat with him, but he always refuses and doesn't communicate with anyone. Misa tries to break through to him, but realizing that he lost his sister decides to leave him alone. Even more days pass, and they send Yumi, his first love from his old school, to try to get him out, but Yu doesn't even look in her direction. Feeling broken and empty, he asks her to go to the store and buy him instant noodles because his supplies are running out, but when she offers to go with her, he refuses because he is angry with her because she acts like she's his mom. Yuma is also offended and leaves, and Yu is left alone and gets depressed. He runs out of food and decides to go to the store, but notices that there are 2 guards at the entrance and the owner of the room. He understands that they probably came to take him by force, so he uses his power to subdue one of them and beats the other. After that, he silently leaves and goes to the bank to withdraw all the money from his account, which at today's exchange rate is about $300. Yes, took inflation into account. He decides to move away from the school where this underscore will not find him, and eventually settles in internet cafe. He lives there for several days. He eats pizza and watches anime, but then he gets bored and decides to take a walk. He notices that sweet donuts are being sold on the street. He tries them and gets into computer games. He decides to try to play and becomes as obsessed with games as an ordinary villain player. He begins to like killing in the game and he gets hooked on sweets and slot machines. One day he could not stand it when he saw that two guys were playing for too long on his favorite slot machine. He went up to them and said a few words, and the guys decided to deal with him under a dark railway bridge. They wanted to beat him, but he used his abilities and forced them to fight each other and beat the last one with sticks. Playing Dango a few days later, a gang leader named Hasemoto approached him. He asked if it was true that you single-handedly dealt with that guy's gang and tried to show his superiority, but you did not talk to him. And he single-handedly dealt with the whole gang and, in the end, made their boss but himself by threatening to pierce his eye with a stick for playing Dango and asking if he wanted a real gangster nickname such as One-Eyed Weakling. After that he became Thunderstorm Gang. Getting involved must be something interesting and decided to try. But then he was hit in the face by a familiar blonde girl. She said that she would not let him cross the line and asked how long she had been watching him. She says that she was there from the very beginning, that she lived with him in his house since Ayumi got into the gang and followed him everywhere, including internet cafes, slot machines, fights and everything else. She says that she feels responsible for this and thinks that she should have protected Ayumi better and could to somehow prevent this. Then she says that no matter what she couldn't let him cross the line and that if he wants to lose his humanity, it's his business. After hearing this Yu comes to his senses a little and asks what he should do. She calls someone and then says that she is taking him to a cafe where they serve healthy food. He refuses to go with her and then she invites him to eat only one piece. After that they will separate and she will not interfere in his affairs. Yu agrees and goes with her to the Juju house. There is no one in the house. His family left and they come inside. She tells him to watch TV while she cooks and then she will be his and puts a plate of omelette in front of him. And he tries it and realizes that the taste is the same as before, and now he tells her that she took the recipe from his mother's notebook which she found in Ayumi's room and must have wanted to cook this dish after his mother left because it was his favorite dish as a child. He remembers the last time Mayumi made him the same omelette with rice and how he complained then at this and begins to cry. He realizes that this was the last omelette with rice that his sweet sister ever cooked for him and eats the entire plate with tears in her eyes. Then he wipes them with a napkin, pours him a cup, bored and lets him rest. He asks what he should do now and she says that he needs to return to the student council. He asks if they promised each other to break up when he tried her strap with her and she replies that he didn't just try it, but ate it all clean, that he probably wanted to interfere in her affairs. He begins to smile, thanks her and says that he will still return to the student council the next day. He gathers his courage and starts a new life. He says goodbye to Ayumi and goes to school, where Yusa and the rest of the class meet him. They are jealous that he attracted the attention of their goddess Ayu. He is glad that this annoying cult of fans is still active in their class. As usual during lunch, he goes to the cafeteria with Jojiro and treats him to beef curry like before Ayumi die. You notice that everyone is trying to be polite to him, and he feels happy. Soon they receive a message that they should come to the office and wonder if the dripper has returned with a new hook. They burst into the office and ask what happened, and it turns out that it's just Yusu who wants to get feedback on her latest video. After hearing this, Seijo begins to glow with happiness and they all sit down to watch the video together. When they finish, Yu asks Jojin and he answers like he's already in heaven. Now gives her an 8 out of 10. But deducts points for her stupid habit of acting like an idol at school and all this drama, and she says that she actually brought them here to ask who would go to the concert with her. She gets 2 tickets for Jean's concert, which will take place the next day, and invites them to choose based on the voting results. Yusa knows nothing about Rocky's post and is not interested in him. Jiro is not happy either and Mas just loves heavy metal and refuses, and now says that at the concert this will not happen naturally. He gets a ticket and finally agrees. Later that day, returning home, he meets a red-haired blind girl. When she passes by saying that she doesn't like being run away, he listens to her voice and remembers that felt when he first listened to Jana's songs on Neo's P4 player. He turns around to ask if she really was the lead singer of a famous group, but instead she comes up to him and asks if he can take her to a place where they sell modonyaki. He is a little surprised, but then he realizes that she is asking about the modern dish okonomiyaki, which also contains yakisoba. He agrees and takes her to a local restaurant where they order this dish and he also orders for himself. During all this, he struggles with his habit of calling home and tell Yuma that he will be late or that he will not come home for the dinner that she prepared. He misses her very much and sighs loudly, and the girl notices this. She confirms his guess that she is that same singer named Salah Shine and asks if something really sad happened to him. She says that he can tell her about it, and they both sit on the street and you tell her about the fact that you lost your sister. She says that there must be someone who changed you since you were able to get out of depression. And you think about the future, and then he remembers her brother Kazuki and asks Salah for a favor. He tells her about him and asks if she can go with him to see a guy who was a guitarist, idolized her and was also going to be successful, but then became like that. She kindly agrees and goes with him to the hospital to see Kazuki. Before leaving, he calls her and says that he met Salah and asks if she wants to meet her too. But she replies that she is not interested because she likes her work and she is not very wants to meet the stars. Then he invites her to meet her brother and asks her to tell her to the hospital. They will arrive later that evening. They go to the hospital to see Kazuki, and on the way she tells him how she herself had to go through a lot of difficulties and at some point she even sacrificed her eyesight in order to succeed. Later they meet Kazuki and she sings for him, and this brings him back a little sanity, and now he also remembers his sister. After that, you return with Salah, and on the way he calls her and tells her about the miracle to the witnesses he became. She says that she already knows about it because she heard about it from the nurse at the hospital and immediately ran there, but it looks like they almost missed each other at the entrance. She thanks him for traveling so far for her and her brother and says that she would like to meet him again. He says that he will be at the concert and she says that she will sing with him in her thoughts, and they say goodbye. The next day, he goes to Snow's concert and enjoys the time spent with her. They buy a bunch of branded mobile accessories from Jana, and in the end they get to the concert. Salah sings his song, and in the middle of the concert you feel uneasy. He for some reason starts Nasta, and then Salah moves on to a new song, and you somehow understand that he has already heard this song as if he had heard it before, and suddenly a lot of memories pop up in his head, and he falls to the ground. When he falls, he has a dream about his memories from another life where he is in a scientific center with many children with the same abilities as him. There he wakes up and listens to Jean's new song with Ayumi, who listens to her favorite singer Yuzu. They get up and go to lunch, and you complain that all the food tastes like medicine because of the ability-enhancing chemicals, and Yumi says that despite this she believes that Carrie can make everyone happy and wants their older brother Shunsu. Yu leans in and talks about Yuma, that he has very strong abilities, so he is under observation, and reveals that he has the ability to travel through time. During lunch he sits at the table next to the guy with long brown hair named Kumogami, who turns out to be Shangsu's best friend. Shangsu calls him Poo because the first part of his name means bear and it becomes his nickname. He thinks that he also has a very strong ability, and if the scientists found out about this they would also lock him up and limit his freedom. His real power is called robbery. It allows him to take away supernatural abilities from other people. Using this power he teams up with other guys including Pooh to free Shunsu, can lead him to a bright future again. Pooh gives him a piece of paper with instructions on how to find the guy with telepathy and steal his ability. He also steals the ability of destruction, which allows him to destroy objects with relatively controlled power. After lunch he returns to his room Shui, but on the way back the scientists take the AI because today is her experiment day, and she forgot to warn about it. Yu is locked in a cell, and after a while he hears loud sounds and alarms. When the door opens he sees one of the best scientists who knows about his real tower. He explains that they tried to forcefully awaken his sister's abilities, and this led to the collapse of an entire building. Now they plan to perform an autopsy to study her and then get rid of her. He heard Shicha, who can pass through walls. He allows you to steal his ability and says that he needs to steal his brother's ability, telekinesis. After the last attempt, Yu manages to free his brother and Shunsu teleports, but Yu is knocked down by the guards. In this moment Yu wakes up in the hospital and remembers what he saw in a dream. He remembers how he and Yu always felt that they had an older brother, and maybe all of this was true, and then suddenly a guy with brown hair comes in and says that it looks like you remembered. It turns out that this is a Kume-jan, the assistant guide who always helps them find people with abilities. Yu asks if this is true and asks him to hold off on questions until he meets his brother because first they should talk to his sister. Yu gets angry and asks how It will save the one who has already died, and says that now he must know about the abilities of his brother Shunsuke can that his memory was restored. After hearing his name, Neo asks if this is Shunsuke, about whom she told Kumogami. He confirms that it is he, who turns out to be the guy who saved her and founded the school she told you about. After that, he tells you to follow him and leads you to a secret high-tech underground structure in the forest. There you finally meet his brother and realize that he is blind and still skeptical about everything that happens. Shunsuke greets you and praises you for all your efforts, and then asks you to sit down while he talks about everything what happened after his time jump. His story begins with him opening his eyes 3 years before the scientists caught them all in his house along with his younger brothers and sisters. He continues to meet with Pooh and gathers all his friends to try to fix everything, but in the end they realize that they are just children and cannot defeat the adults who want to catch them. After every failed attempt, Shunsuke comes up with a new plan and returns to the past to fix everything. This continues several times, and each time he notices that his vision is getting worse and worse. This continues until the last time when Shunsuke decides to collect a lot of money and create a safe zone for children with superpowers. He succeeds, but he completely loses his sight. He asks his friends Midoki and Mana to erase the memories of him from you and Yumi so that he can move freely and they are safe now. He called you to me and steal your abilities, using his ability to go back in time when Ayumi was sick and save her. He then asks you to meet him in a new time and explain everything so that he can act accordingly. You ask if she knew about this all along, and she replies that she knew thanks to her Kuma's ability when she went to look for him. It turned out that he was wrong about his abilities, and they decided to keep it a secret because they were afraid of what he would become if he continued to accumulate abilities after that. Yu stands up, takes strength from Shunsuke. Ken wakes up next to Yumo in the night. She got sick the next day. He goes to school as usual, and their godfather comes to them and tells them that someone in the dorm had a collapse. Yu says that it's probably his sister and asks Na and Yusu to go with him. And then everything goes on as usual. But after that he leaves the room and decides to tell her everything and asks if she would believe him. Rejoices and even thanks her for saving him in another future where he fell into depression. He asks her to help convince the others, and the next day they all decide to infiltrate Yui's school. That night, Yu takes her powers to make sure that she does not go crazy like last time, and then hides in a locker by the door on the roof to protect her from Kanashi's attack. When the time comes, he approaches her, scolds her and allows Neo to take care of the blade and then drives her away, finally protecting her, his sister, from having Ishikawa take her to another. When he does this, Midoki from this timeline notices his actions and decides to talk to him, and his godfather Yu assures them that he is really a time traveler, calling Kumu rest in peace. When they decide to go to Shunsui together, Shunsui that he brought them here because he believes that he has awakened the ability to teleport, but Yu reveals that in fact he traveled in time and tells them everything. Shunsuo believes him and says that he doesn't know how he managed to get his memories back from another timeline. This is definitely a rare and inexplicable phenomenon. He then says that now you must stay in this research center until your abilities disappear and asks, Shunsuo explains that you have the most powerful ability in the world, and now he has the ability to travel through time, and groups of people from all over the world will try to catch him to use him for world domination. With this in mind, he must stay here because it is the most secure facility in all of Japan, and then gives them a tour of the research laboratories, where he introduces them to Dr. Tsu, who turns out to be the same guy from the future who saved you here in this center. They are all working on creating a vaccine to cure people all over the world from this disease. Yu asks if they are sick, and the doctor answers that they know about comets with a long orbital period, and Yumi says that she knows about them because it is her hobby, and the doctor praises her and then explains that there is a comet called Charlotte that flies over Earth every 75 years. When this comet passes by the Earth, it leaves a special dust on its surface, and whoever inhales or ingests this dust acquires supernatural abilities that lay dormant in his DNA until he reached the emotional peak that is adolescence. About 400 years ago, a comet passed at an unusually low altitude, and then many people acquired these abilities. At that time they were called witches, and this led to a massive witch hunt that continues to some extent to this day. Now they are working on creating a vaccine that will prevent the appearance of these abilities in future generations. Having heard all this, Usagi decides to stay here with Ayumi and Shunsui at school, but they can make friends with his group and introduce their childhood friends to them. They all like Ayumi and they even accept you as one of theirs. They invite you to play with them. But then Kuma finds out about another holder of the abilities and you understand that Kuma never doused himself with water and did it only to hide his identity as Shunsui advised advice, and he answers yes. It says he can't come. After that, he gets out of the car and gets into another and tells the driver Faru to take him to school. Everything becomes suspicious when Faru doesn't turn towards the school, but drives straight to an abandoned factory and admits that he has a family. According to Shunsui orders, they don't work with adults who have families because they can easily be taken hostage and used against them. Being a former user of Fubuki's abilities, wanted to be useful and decided to hide from them his family. But this turned against him when his family was taken hostage by people from a foreign mafia group and demanded that he remain silent about this, is what brought his godfather to them. Fubuki apologizes for his mistake and the godfather says that this is the criminal code and that you should worry about his family. After that, they go to the factory and meet with foreigners to tell Fubuki that they have another task for him to bring you to them. They blackmail him to do this and then knock out the godfather's teeth and give him truth serum to find out all the secrets. After that, they kidnap the girl and also take her into custody. The hostages call Shunsui and tell him to send you alone, otherwise they will kill all the hostages, including the Fubuki family. They all sit down and begin to come up with a plan, but nothing comes to mind. They think about the fact that you can travel through time, but this becomes impossible. And they find out that the Faru family was taken hostage even before they decided to create this institution. There is no guarantee at this time everything will work out the same way. Shichi'd send you alone, and if something goes wrong he will fight with them. You can always use time travel since it's the only option. They at Shunsui convince you to take on this task, but you starts to panic under so much pressure and says he's not sure he can handle it. He almost uses collapse to kill everyone, but Shunsui hugs him like a true friend and says that if he feels like he can't handle it then he can just go back in time. You goes to a meeting with the mafia and uses his ability to people without abilities to check if they have weapons. When they come out he is surprised and gets hit by a little girl from the killer behind him. He tries to move in time, but the girl manages to cut off his right eye and now he can move in time. He decides to use collapse, but the mafiosi say that if he does this, he will kill the two hostages he is holding underground. He tries to resist with the help of telekinesis, but the girl killer continues to hit him, and he uses collapse and destroys everything. The only one who dies is the Ku mages who protects you, and Shunsui dies, and the others also come to the factory. Shunsui falls to his knees and crawls to his godfather, and when he gets to him, Tae tells him not to die. The godfather replies that Shunsui himself came up with, that his nickname is Poo, and takes his last breath. Write in the comments, what do you think about poor Kumogami? This is the real ending of this story. 2 days later you wakes up in the hospital. After the operation, Shiken tells him the details and says that now everything is fine, but the godfather could not come. After that you feel sad thinking about your brother, that he feels the same way as you when you lost you and thought that you would never see her again. At first you go into shock and think that it's all because of you, but then Shinuka's friends tell you that it was a miscalculation on both sides and it's not your fault. Then Ayumi comes and examines him and tries to cheer him up. Days pass. Everyone comes to see him, starting from Joji, Ryuna, and the others. When Yuna brings food you ask Miza to come out and talk with her about the afterlife and what is beyond and after. Talking with her she realizes that she should appreciate the few moments that you gave her thanks to her abilities. Later, when he returns to his hometown to promote his parents' restaurant, Miza comes out and praises their parents, and this also becomes an important moment in her story. Days pass, and you gradually begins to move and recover. In the end he goes to his brother and sees how depressed he is, but despite this he keeps his cool and tells him that soon other foreign mafia groups will come to Japan and will hunt for them. No doubt he is depressed and upset because of the loss of his best friend. He returns to his room where Neo is waiting for him. He tells her about what happened. Neo proposes a crazy idea. With his power, he can hypothetically deprive everyone in this world of their abilities so that no one can attack them. But for this he will have to travel around the world and take over the bodies of thousands, if not millions of people, and even if he can do this, it is unknown whether he will retain his sanity. Thinks it over, realizing how cruel it is, but it could lead to a better future for everyone. He stands up and promises Neo that he will do this for her. He says that he loves her and explains that over time, he realized this when she helped him cope with depression. Neo says that she only did it because she felt guilty or responsible. In addition, she says that this is a crazy idea and he doesn't have to do it, but he says that it doesn't matter and he will do it for her. She falls in love with him because he wants to create a better future for everyone. After hearing this, she asks him to forgive, that she will wait, and if he copes, then she will definitely fall in love with him so that everything becomes real. Neo tells him that first he needs to deprive her of her powers, and he does it to show his determination. Having made this decision, he goes to his brother and tells him about his crazy goal that he has already begun to act, and they, together with other members of the Shunsu group, decide that he should go abroad and solve the problem as a whole and leave Japan to them. After weighing the pros and cons, Yu begins to pack his things, and on the day of departure, he receives a small brochure in translation as a gift and promises that he will keep his word. The journey begins in Singapore, where he finds a list of ability users. Paying for it, from there he sets off to the Philippines to depower a leader who turns out to be able to read minds. He uses this ability to find someone who is looking for the abilities of a boy named Angela. Then he meets with Angela and seals his abilities, which allows him to see the location of ability users on the map. After that, he begins to rampage and rob all ability users in the Philippines. Then he goes to South Africa, where he destroys many small groups in which there are ability users. He soon receives the nickname the One-Eyed Grim Reaper, and a bounty is placed on his head. Then he goes to Egypt, where gains the ability to determine which ability he stole. After that, he begins to check one country after another and collects a huge number of abilities, including those that allow him to mentally translate, not sleep, and strengthen existing diseases. In the mountains of Afghanistan, he finds on the map a new group of people who do not seem to have developed their abilities yet. He tracks them down and uses his ability to enhance diseases so that their abilities manifest themselves earlier and he can steal them. He then goes to other countries where he has already been to make sure that no one is left with the potential to develop new abilities. In India, he encounters the Anti-Reaper for the first time, who attacks him with a weapon, but he defeats them all with their ability to create a force field and takes away all their abilities. Then he goes to Peru and finds a girl who uses her ability to heal others, but unfortunately also steals it, and wonders if he should make a time jump and save his godfather, but then decides not to do it, justifying himself by saying that he should not break the laws of nature more than he already violated. In Cuba, he begins to feel the first symptoms of the fact that many abilities coexist in him. He accidentally uses collapse and destroys a building, and also almost kills a man with the help of telekinesis. Pulls himself together in time. In the end, he ends up in Saudi Arabia and tries to fall asleep to get some rest. But when he wakes up, he discovers that he is in a new place and his memory snooze, and realizes that in a dream he caused mass destruction by going into berserk mode and hunting for those with abilities. He decides never to sleep again and continues his mission. Then he goes to Italy, where he sits on a chair while he is attacked by a crowd of mafiosi shooting at him with pistols, and he wonders what he's doing there and why he's traveling the world at all. He starts to lose his purpose, but then remembers her looking at the little book of translations that Neo gave him. He tries to remember her face and who she is, but too much time has passed for him to remember it. In the end, he convinces himself that she must have been someone important to him, and continues his mission of erasing one country after another with a map of those with powers. After a whole year of brutal travels around the world, fighting countless groups of terrorists and stealing a seemingly endless amount of abilities, he lost himself many times on this journey, but his feelings for Neo always brought him back to the mission. Finally, the day comes when he deprives the last man on Earth his supernatural ability that gave him courage. When he falls to the ground, having fulfilled his promise, Shun-Suk flies to pick him up and takes him home. When he wakes up in a hospital bed next to him, she sits and he asks who she is, and she understands that he has completely forgotten her. After he gained so much strength and went through so many trials, he forgot who he was before. But she decides to keep her promise and tells him that she is his girlfriend, and talks about how they worked together in college council. She says that it was she who made that booklet for him, and he says that all this time he carried it with him as a talisman.